Hi, today we're going to be talking about inequalities. We already started talking about it. So I just wrote up here the definition of inequality. You should have this written down in your notes when you come to class tomorrow. We already talked about this, but let's review. An inequality is a mathematical sentence that compares quantities that are not equal. Inequalities contain the symbols less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. Always remember the open side of the symbol is always going towards the bigger number. For example, if you had 6 and 10, this one is less than that one. So you would always want the less than, which makes an L. Less than is pointing to the less number. If you had 5 and -3, you always want the big mouth pointed to the bigger number. Okay, so this says 5 is greater than -3, which is true, and 6 is less than 10. If there's a line underneath, that means less than or equal to. So 6 is less than or equal to 10. So here's how we solve and graph. We're going to solve exactly the same way we solve equations, with a little exception. Okay, what did we do before? The first thing we have to do is determine how we get the variable by itself. We know that when there's no number written in front of a variable, if it makes you feel better, you can write a 1 because there is a 1 in front of there. We're always solving for 1x or 1y or just plain old x or plain old y. I'm also going to show you what sign is in front of this x. It is positive. Okay, this problem is pretty easy, but as they get harder, you know, the little positive or the little negative will help you because some of you have been having some trouble with that. So you have to say, how am I going to get, what is happening to x that's not making it by itself? Well, it's getting added 5. So let's do the opposite. You always want to do the opposite. The opposite of addition is subtraction. I always want to try to get x by itself. If I subtract 5 on one side, I will subtract 5 on the other side. That will cancel out my 5s, which is always the goal. And then I just bring down my x. I'm not going to write the 1 with it. I bring down my sign, and then I do this problem, 7 minus 5, and we know 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay, so how do I graph this? This tells me that x is greater than 2. That means on my number line, if 0 was here, 2 would be here. It's not equal to 2, but it's greater than 2. That means it can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's all the numbers that are greater than 2, which is this way. So if you want to color it in when you graph like that, or you can color it in like this with an open circle at 2. Let's do this example. Y plus 10 is less than or equal to 3. This is a positive y. I see that 10 is being added to it, so it's not by itself. I have to get it alone. The only way I can do that is the opposite of what's happening to it. Right now, the opposite is that it's being added to 10, so the opposite is minus 10. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. That's going to cancel out, and I get y. I just bring down my sign. Now I got a problem. I've got two different signs. Different signs subtract. Different signs subtract. Okay, I have different signs. I'm going to subtract the numbers, 10 minus 3. Take the sign of the bigger number. So the answer is y is less than or equal to -7. Here's 0. Here's -7. Because it's less than or equal, we talked about doing the filled in dot right at -7. That means everything, every answer that I could possibly have that I want to color in is going to be less than -7. That means these numbers are all the less than ones. So you would color that way. If you want to do it above, you just do the circle and you go that way. Okay, how about this one? We've got a positive x, 7 is being added to x. What is the opposite of addition? Subtraction, okay? So if I subtract the same number, it comes out to be 0. So what happens? This cancels out, my x just comes down, my sign comes down. I have opposite signs, this is addition, that's subtraction. Subtract the numbers, take the sign of the bigger number, so it's positive. So here's my number line, here's my 0, and here's my positive 3. Am I going to have an open or a closed circle? It's going to be closed. All my answers are greater than or equal to 3. That's these numbers over here. So I'm going to color in this way. All right, let's go over to example number 4. Okay, we have 3 less than or equal to b plus 1 and 1/3. So now you have a fraction, a mixed number on the same side as b. Okay, so again, we talked about this being 1b. We know it's positive, but I have to get b alone. What's happening to b? It's being subtracted by 1 and 1/3. What's the opposite of subtraction? We want to do addition of the same number, but whatever happens to one side happens to the other. When you do that, thankfully these will cancel, and my sign comes down. I have 3. These are both positive, so two of the same signs. When you have the same sign, you add. So this is just 3 plus 1 is 4 and 1/3. So now what does this say? This says 4 and 1/3 is less than or equal to b. Sometimes if you have the b over here and the number over here, sometimes it's a little harder to graph. So if you want to switch it so that the b comes over here, sometimes it's a little easier to graph, and I'll show you what I mean. Instead of writing 4 and 1/3 is less than or equal to b, we can put the b, notice the big open mouth of the alligator is going towards the b, so we want the open mouth of the alligator to still be going towards the b. So now I have it written, b is greater than or equal to 4 and 1/3. So how do I graph a fraction? Well, you know 0's here, 4 is here, 5's here. 4 and 1/3 is only 1/3 of the way over. Is it going to be an open circle or a closed circle? It's going to be a closed circle because of this line right here, greater than or equal to. All right, so you're going to do a closed circle. If all my answers are greater than this number, then all my answers are going to be that way. So I'm going to go ahead and color this way, and that's the answer. Okay, this is when it starts to get tricky with inequalities. Because right now, we don't have an addition or subtraction. We have this -5 is being multiplied by the x. And there is a rule that you don't do in equations, that you do in inequalities. I'm going to write down the rule up here. Okay, the rule is when you are dividing or multiplying by a negative, and you are writing this down into your notes, the sign flips. Okay, this is the biggest thing that you're going to forget when you're doing these problems. When you are dividing by a negative, when you are multiplying by a negative, the sign will flip. What is happening to x? It is being multiplied by -5. What is the opposite of being multiplied by -5? Dividing by -5 to make that cancel into 1. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. This is my problem. I just divided by a -5. I told you when you're dividing by a negative, you flip the sign. Watch what happens. X, watch this, little less than is now going to become greater than -9, because 45 divided by -5 is -9. How do I graph that? I go to 0. I go to -9. Is it going to be opened or closed? It's going to be open because it's not equal to, so I put the open circle. This means all my answers are greater than -9. We know to the left means less than. We know to the right means greater than. So since it's greater than, we're coloring it this way. Again, if you want to do it above the line, you can color it like that. Okay, we have a couple more examples. These should all be in your notes. Okay, b divided by -8 is greater than or equal to -6. Okay, so what should we do? Hopefully you said we should do the opposite of dividing by -8, which is multiplying both sides by -8. Our goal is to always get b alone. We're isolating the variable. When you multiply by the same number that's in the denominator, that just all cancels to be 1. When we multiply by -8, I told you that that's what flips the sign, so it's going to be b. Instead of writing greater than or equal to, I'm now writing less than or equal to. A negative times a negative is a positive 48. How would you graph that? Here's 0, here's 48. It's going to be a closed circle because of the line underneath it. This tells me all my answers are less than or equal to 48. Less than is that way. I color in this way. My last example right here. Okay, we have negative y divided by 4 is less than 3. So how do I deal with this? This is being divided by a 4. So I'm going to multiply by a 4. That's the opposite. That will cancel into negative y. I keep my sign. 3 times 4 is 12. You can never solve for a negative variable. Talked about time and time again. How do you get rid of that negative? You can either multiply by a negative or divide by a negative to make the negative go away. So I'm going to multiply both sides by a negative. When I multiply by a negative, my sign flips. Negative times negative is a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, my last graph. Here's 0. Here's negative 12. This is saying the where I color in is going to be greater than negative 12. So all my answers are greater than negative 12. It's an open circle. I color in greater than negative 12. Okay, make sure you have each example in your notes, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Oh my God.